It's been over a year since the hero was sent home from another world. There were moments when he saw some kind of dream. The question arose as to whether Keisuke had truly defeated the Demon King, and whether the protagonist's sacrifice had been in vain. In the distance, a young girl with long hair tied into a ponytail stood among the ruins. When she turned around, there were tears in her eyes. Someone's voice was heard. The protagonist was called Father and asked if he was listening. The man noticed a girl standing very close and holding the hero's hand. The couple was in the middle of a rather spacious room, where there were shelves with a huge number of books. The hero reacted with surprise to the girl's words. The dark-haired man asked her what her belly had to do with anything. He replied that this should be done with everyone. The man exhaled tiredly. His daughter was very serious about this. She was a 16-year-old blue-eyed blonde who looked like a doll, a typical Western beauty. It should have been said earlier that they are not related by blood. The girl, putting her index finger to her chin, looked playfully at the man, who blushed slightly. Another girl in glasses with a small bow in her hair told the hero to stop doing that, pointing to where they were. She looked angrily at the blonde heroine, who replied that they were in a bookstore. The second blonde girl is also not thrilled about the heroine in glasses. She asked what they were reading and saw a book about pregnancy in her hands, adding a question about why that one. The blonde girl was circling around the man lovingly when he sighed tiredly and put his hand to his face. The hero promised to buy the girl this book and asked her to stop clinging to him. The girl did not let him go for a step. Turning to the hero, she said that she thought he saw her as more than just a daughter. Therefore, she would like him to pay even more attention to her. She added that if he feels awkward because of her, it means that her feelings are strange for the hero. The protagonist tried to push the girl away by putting his hand on her head and told her to stop putting her hand on him. But the girl only replied that they could be seen from the cash register, in particular, the girl in glasses. The blue-eyed girl wanted to show her who he really belonged to. Adjusting her glasses so that one middle finger was extended, the heroine said that they got along quite well for parents and child. She added, a little aggressively, that they should remember about measures. The protagonist felt that the situation was getting heated and, apologizing for the noise, said that they would soon finish and go home. Closing the book, the girl in glasses responded negatively, saying that this was not the reason for her upset. Suddenly, she pressed herself against the man's arm, to which he exclaimed loudly. With a displeased look, the blonde said that a saleswoman should not approach a customer like that, to which she replied that parents and children should not press themselves against each other like that either. At some point, a signal sounded, notifying about the arrival of a message on the phone. The man took the phone out of his pocket, looked closely at the display, thinking that it was a work message. When he opened it, he saw a photo of another girl with a short haircut. She took a selfie in a very provocative pose and was dressed quite revealingly. Both young ladies standing on opposite sides of the guy were a little surprised. They turned their gaze to the guy. The blonde asked him if he liked this color of underwear and thought about buying the same tomorrow. The second girl blushed very much and spoke in confusion about what kind of training they need to go through to get to this. Raising his hands at chest level, the boy waved them negatively, trying to justify himself. He said that because of his father's experience, he was not to blame. The hero seemed to have an innate instinct for paternal care, which is why girls constantly circled around him, like daughters who had found their patron. However, the real reason for this was not in character, but in the events that had occurred a month earlier. He once saved another world by personally destroying a demon lord. But he had to pay a high price for it. Everything that has happened since then is just part of his retribution. Only 4 weeks had passed. Then a man's angry voice was heard in the room, scolding Nakamoto for yet another accident. He was again accused of incompetence and uselessness. Nakamoto muttered a routine apology, neither remorseful nor meaningful. His superior continued his tirade with irritation, pointing to his reclusive past. He claimed that people like Nakamoto were even capable of killing their parents after a family dinner. These words were accompanied by a threatening approach. Nakamoto remained silent, knowing that if anyone knew about his life, they might think the same. At the age of 15, he was transported to another dimension, where he lived for 17 long years. He sat against a stone wall, like a castle wall, with his sword stuck in the ground nearby. Behind him, the mountains towered. He spent his entire youth and adult years wandering, and only at 32 did he realize how much time had passed. The demon had been defeated only last year. A crowd of grim-faced people surrounded the hero, expressing gratitude and assuring him that everything was fine. After that, he was informed that he would be returned. He stood on one knee, disbelieving what was happening, and so his mission ended. From somewhere behind him, a woman's voice exclaimed in surprise that he was still alive. Nakamoto thought sadly that was exactly what they would have said. As he climbed over the fence, he heard someone ask, surprised by his sudden appearance. Before being sent back, he persuaded the priests to leave him memories, staging a 17-year imprisonment. Although the memory remained, the images of loved ones had faded over the years, and he could not remember those who were near him. He sat listlessly, leafing through the job directory like a hopeless job seeker. According to the fake biography, he was Nakamoto Keisuke, a 32-year-old man with an incomplete education and no stable job. Standing in the kitchen with a knife, he cut up a fish, telling himself that it was definitely not an orc. Reality seemed insane, and at first he thought he was going crazy. But soon he realized he still had magic, although it was useless. Only fiery emissions. He did not even smoke. A passing truck jerked sharply. Its wheel fell into the canal. The hero easily lifted the rear of the car with his little finger, quickly eliminating the problem. When he returned, he retained all his skills. The scars on his body showed a hard life, but his strength remained. And yet, maybe it would be better to become ordinary again. He still broke dishes. In response to another shout from his boss, Nakamoto muttered an apology. In another world, this item would have been restored long ago. The irritated owner of the establishment watched the hero pick up the pieces. Nakamoto himself reminded himself that he was still alive, and that was not so bad. But deep down he knew he was a sinner, and he must go through the path of redemption. Someone once asked him if he really had the power to defeat the demon lord. Then the question was asked, would his sacrifice not be in vain? He carefully wrote down in his notebook that he had broken only 2 plates today, fewer than usual. His thoughts returned to the girl with the long hair tied in a bow, whose face remained troubled in his memory. After the incident, he was released early and assumed with grim certainty that he would soon be fired. Walking along the old streets, he wondered if there had been a sweet shop here before. He couldn't have mistaken the route, but the place had changed. The city seemed alien. No one knew who he was, and he was left completely alone in this stone anthill. Wandering through the deserted quarters, he mentally asked for forgiveness from a certain Elsa, whom he could not save. He killed her. His eyes, hidden by his bangs, were empty. He vowed to live in poverty as a punishment. Approaching the arcade, he wiped his face with his sleeve and slowly walked inside. Nakamoto wiped his face with the sleeve of his jacket and slowly walked towards the building with the arcade machines, as if trying to escape from reality, at least for a while. He sat down in front of one of the machines, still asking Elsa for forgiveness in his thoughts. Here, in this noisy corner of the city, no one would judge loneliness. Turning on his phone, he chose the game Gertsen to distract himself. It was interesting to notice how even in the game reality the differences between worlds were especially clear. Staring intently at the screen, he began playing with a slight smile. Suddenly, a girl passing by cast a suspicious glance at him. The display showed a cute heroine, and something about her seemed familiar to Nakamoto. He looked down, tormented by the question, what was he doing? The internal pain pushed me to dark thoughts. Everything could be stopped with one shot, and then there would be silence. It would become easier. But the moment he pressed the button, he was called out sharply. He flinched. In front of him stood a girl with long black hair, a short skirt, and an electronic collar around her neck. She claimed that he had photographed her underwear. There was no doubt in her voice, only accusation. She added defiantly that she had noticed it all herself. For a moment, he seemed to see Elsa in her, but then he realized, no, it was just a striking resemblance. The girl was still standing in front of him, asking irritably if he was listening to her. She called him a strange man, and continued to insist that he took the picture, claiming that she had seen everything. Nakamoto, confused, asked her what she was talking about. Then he turned his phone screen toward her and explained that he was just playing. The girl froze, unsure how to react. A group of young men immediately approached her, addressed her by name, Rio, and asked with interest whether he had really been secretly taking photos. Rio shrugged and said that it was possible, since he looked like a typical otaku. One of the guys dismissively called Nakamoto trash, and, stepping on his foot, rudely told him to get out. Putting his hand on his shoulder, the same guy demanded that he understood. A name popped into Nakamoto's mind. Sato Shinshio. Opening the status system, he saw an interesting note. If you call him by name and tease him, he will instantly lose his temper. Holding back his laughter, the hero looked at Sato, made a polite face, and said with a slight mockery that it was just funny. Sato ordered him to follow him. Nakamoto mockingly asked how far they would have to go. They came to an alley where a crowd had gathered. One of the guys demanded money, saying that then he would not call the police. The hero ironically asked why not settle everything in a fight, like in the wild savannah. The boy froze for a moment, his mouth open. Nakamoto, continuing to mock him, called him the Lion King and added that he saw a hunter in him. Sato turned to the crowd and shouted who had called his name, suspecting that it could have been Ryo. Grabbing the hero by the collar, he promised to kill him. Nakamoto continued to smile. Sato yelled at him to stop laughing and punched him in the stomach, but missed. The hero easily dodged. Surprised, Sato couldn't believe what was happening. He asked how such an old man could be so fast. The protagonist calmly advised him not to get distracted and clenched his fist. He delivered a precise and powerful blow straight to the face, knocking out several teeth. Looking at his scratched hand, Nakamoto calmly stated that the Japanese were too weak these days. Sato, who had just been the terror of the area, was now writhing on the ground, coughing. The protagonist stepped forward, declaring that they still had the advantage in numbers, but it would be better if they took their comrade and disappeared. One of them shouted back that he would put Nakamoto in his place. Nakamoto activated his mind's eye ability, which enhanced his reactions and the precision of his movements. He dodged attacks with lightning speed, counterattacked, not giving his opponents the slightest chance. One by one they fell, and soon begged for mercy. He threw the last one on his back onto the asphalt. He shook his hands and grinned, asking if there were any more willing. The frightened teenagers began to panic, thinking he was crazy. They all screamed and ran away. Nakamoto, watching them go, only noted how quickly they had given up. Sato remained lying there. The hero looked at him and thought mockingly that friendly ties among street hooligans were a fiction. He did not finish him off, but on the contrary, he cured him, so as not to leave traces. In a week, he would be healthy. Ryo, who had recently accused him of vulgarity, was now trembling with fear, sitting on the ground. Nakamoto approached and asked himself with a cold face, what to do with her now? She begged him not to come closer, backing up to the wall and literally jumping out of her shoes. She was so scared that she lost control of herself. Seeing her underwear, the hero remembered the stupid scene of the accusation and realized that explanations were now unavoidable. Suddenly, Nakamoto held the phone close to the girl's face, demanding that she look at the screen. He showed her that there was no photo of her in the memory, only the game. With a stern and almost threatening expression, he asked if she could see a picture of her underwear there. The girl, shaking, stammered that she could not. Then he calmly declared that the whole thing was just a stupid misunderstanding caused by bad taste, and that he was not to blame for anything. The girl continued to shake with fear, and the hero, slumping his shoulders, asked if she could hear him at all. Sighing with fatigue, he felt the situation pressing on him even more and making everything worse. Because of the saved game data, his phone continued to receive notifications about victories, experience points, and new skills. However, as he walked down the street, he couldn't shake the image of a crying girl. His inner turmoil now felt like that +2 to experience, not joy, but a heavy reminder. Still, he was heading home. There was nothing of interest to him in this city, for now. He approached his dilapidated, long unrenovated house. The building, as it seemed to him, was teeming with ghosts and ominous energy. As he climbed the rickety steps leading to the apartment, he thought about how pathetic and insignificant he was. Taking off his shoes and going inside, he suddenly froze. The balcony door was open, and the face of an unknown girl flashed behind the curtain. At that very moment, this same girl, beaming with joy, ran out to him, calling him a hero, and cheerfully greeting him. She threw her arms around his neck and pressed her whole chest against him in delight. Nakamoto was shocked, confused, and screamed, demanding that she stop and explain. He didn't understand what was going on or who this girl was. Her scent was reminiscent of shampoos, and her figure seemed overly impressive. This disorientated him even more. Gathering his strength, he pushed the girl away with both hands, and for a moment decided that he had come to the wrong apartment. But after looking around, he realized that this was definitely his place. He stood there confused, not knowing what to do. The girl blushed slightly and continued to look at him with a warm smile. Nakamoto was 32 years old. He lived in a modest room for which he paid 100,000 yen a month. His existence was supported by help from his father, and although he was already over 30, he still depended on his parents, although he dreamed of gaining financial independence. The same stranger was now standing at the door and watching him attentively. Meanwhile, he was looking through the mail slot where letters were usually dropped. Dark thoughts were spinning in his head. He considered himself a useless, disgusting loser who dreamed of disappearing without a trace. Mixed with these thoughts, he suddenly noticed again how expressive the girl's breasts were. Soon she quietly asked him if everything was okay. Then she invited him to come into the room. He sank to the floor at the entrance, pressing his back against the door, and exclaimed that she had noticed him after all. Now they were sitting on the floor on opposite sides of a small table. Silence reigned in the room, until the hero finally asked a question. He asked her if she was a thief, but she immediately denied it. He suggested that she might be a ghost, but she denied it again, gradually becoming angry. She introduced herself. Her name was Angelica, and she was a holy virgin. Her tone implied that the hero should be familiar with this title. Nakamoto felt awkward and even blushed. In his mind, holy virgins were women who led a detached life, avoiding men and preserving chastity. Unexpectedly, the girl said that she knew what he was thinking. This was her first conversation with a man. The hero asked again in surprise. Standing up from her seat, Angelica came up close to him and began talking about how unusual a man's voice was for her. It seemed heavy and deep, as if the environment itself had changed. This surprised her. Pressing herself against Nakamoto's chest, she noted with amazement how different men were from women. It was all too difficult for her. After a moment, he asked in a strangled voice to explain what was going on. The girl returned to her seat, closed her eyes, and began her story. She explained that, although he had saved their world, sending him back without a reward had been a big mistake. And those who had made that decision subsequently reconsidered their attitude. The kings and high priests debated for days until they finally agreed that the hero deserved a reward. When Nakamoto asked what she had to do with it, Angelica replied that it was very simple. She continued, saying that the outcome of their meeting was the decision to present the hero with the gift of the Holy Virgin. Nakamoto was surprised. More than a year had passed since his return, and only now someone decided to thank him. He admitted that he felt unworthy of such an honor. Too much had happened. Angelica agreed, adding that his merits were not recognized immediately, and that she had thought so. The price of victory was too high. She said that the inhabitants of their world wondered why the hero had not been executed at all. Nakamoto commented on this with disbelief. The girl pressed herself against him again and said that she had been sent to him as an apology. The hero noted to himself that she was standing too close. He asked her what exactly she meant by those words. The girl did not immediately understand the essence of his question. Nakamoto explained, why did he need the Holy Virgin? This situation made him uneasy. Angelica blushed deeply and admitted that his guess was correct. Then she called him by his name, which made him stop and ask again why she suddenly called him that. She came close to him. He smelled a faint scent, maybe perfume, maybe shampoo. Neither existed in that world, but it didn't matter now. He couldn't concentrate. What he asked. The girl answered. From this day on, she was his wife. Confused, he asked her how old she was. In Japan, you can't get married before you're 16. The girl was delighted and, folding her hands, said that she had just turned 16 last month, so there were no obstacles. The girl loomed over him. Nakamoto noted that even if she had reached the required age, she could not marry without her parents' consent. But she had no parents, as it turned out, and therefore no permission to come from. She was almost sitting on his lap, and it was starting to irritate him. The girl thought about it and asked if he could become her guardian. The hero asked if she was really asking him to become a father. She nodded, adding that she had never seen her real father. Angelica admitted that she always missed her father's care.
I would be very happy if you subscribed to the channel, liked and wrote a comment, rating this manga on a scale from 1 to 10. Your opinion is very important to me. This will help me better understand what my audience is interested in, because you are really important to me.
The main character sighed and said that he agreed. From now on, he would be her father. Since things had gone this far, he threw her off and demanded that she stand up. The girl hit her face hard on the floor. Looking up with tears in her eyes, she asked why he wouldn't let her marry him, calling him evil. Meanwhile, he began to take off his outerwear, and she asked with naive sincerity, what if the father and daughter got married? After all, they weren't related. Enthusiastically, she exclaimed that she wanted to have his child, adding that she liked him. Nakamoto couldn't help but exclaim that this was complete nonsense. He said that even if she liked someone, she couldn't just throw herself at them. Angelica only gently replied that she was doing everything of her own free will. With a mug in her hands, She told how a month ago the high priest approached all the holy virgins who were to marry the hero. Of them, 6 chose the color red. Unable to decide who exactly to send, they chose the cutest one, Angelique. The protagonist could not understand why she volunteered. The girl answered that he was a hero who defeated the Demon King. But in her eyes, he looked sad. He gave everything to save their world, and they returned him, forgetting to return the main thing. She claimed to understand how he felt. The protagonist exclaimed that she had the wrong idea about him. Angelique said that they were in the same boat. He did not understand what she was talking about. Then she explained that in her world, people were afraid of the strong fear of illness, troubles, and curses. So they gave their children to the gods. Holy virgins were taken, regardless of age, marriage, or kinship. They were left alone, beautiful, but forever isolated. She remembered being chained to the cross. The temple was supposed to bring joy to the deity in this way. Virginity is a sacrifice to save lives. She put her finger to the hero's lips and said that there was not much difference between them. She placed one knee on the table and slowly climbed onto it, spilling the drink from the mug. Her existence, like the hero's, was lost. But despite everything, she still wanted her true self back. She said she would be the happiest if she could find it again. Those people did a lot, and it would be great if they returned everything that belonged to them. The protagonist was stunned when he spoke about her true identity. The girl was a little worried at the first meeting with the hero, because she did not know what he loved. But she was lucky that the protagonist turned out to be nicer than she thought. She said that Nakamoto had a lonely look. She again approached him very close and asked if he was the guardian of the memory of Elsa, and added that it was probably very difficult to forget her. The hero stopped short and looked at the girl with surprised eyes, and then sighed heavily and said that she was still a child. The girl asked if she really looked like a child, to which the main character answered positively. The girl said that she was the one who was seeking revenge for being demoted to the position of a holy maiden, and that she had to arouse the man's desires. The protagonist said that he understood her feelings for him, and that she wanted him to be her father, but her feelings were mixed and made her think that she liked him, even if she did not. Standing on all fours on the bed, the girl said that this was not the case, but the protagonist told her not to worry because she had time to think about everything. The main character said that the girl was only 16 years old and that she needed to try a lot of things first. Meanwhile, the hero suggested waiting for her to come of age, and if her opinion did not change, then he would think about marriage. However, it was too early to think about it now. He said that the girl needed to do a lot of things in this world. For example, meet new people, and after all this, find answers to her questions. She could very well fall in love with a peer. Angelica asked the hero if he rejected her, to which the main character replied that this was not the case. He simply did not want to take advantage of the girl's feelings. The girl responded positively and said that there was no way to return to her world. The guy began to say that it was fun and that they could live together, starting from the time they would be father and daughter. This method will be a kind of test for them. The girl stared at the guy, not understanding. This is a test to see if the girl can love him, even after she becomes a woman. The guy told the girl not to tell others about this, because if they find out that she has the intention to marry her father, they will think that she is inadequate. The hero replied that everything was fine then, and told her not to feel bad about it. Then the girl exclaimed about whether she had a chance. The hero answered her that if he were a teenager, then there would be a chance. Listening to the girl, the main character took some products out of the refrigerator. She also said that, if you think about it, the main character was only 30, and what was wrong with falling in love? The main character answered that it was wrong and bad. Nakamoto said that from that time on, he would be her tutor, so he ordered her to listen to everything he was going to teach her. The girl agreed, and said that then she would try to become his girlfriend. The hero answered the girl that since everything was clear, they should eat and go to bed. The hero was very tired. The hero put the frying pan on the stove, and at the same time the girl was capricious and said that she did not want to go to bed. She wanted to be with him until late and every day, to which the hero answered her that if she did not do as he said, she would never grow up. The protagonist said that it was time to eat. He cooked the girl some jiaozi. They were very tasty, although after she ate them she might have bad breath. The girl asked him if this was a high-class dish. The hero answered positively. The protagonist only now thought and realized that his salary would not be enough to cover all the expenses. The girl turned to the guy again and said that a moment ago he was worried about her. The hero answered positively and asked what was wrong with that. The girl replied that it was a scam, because it made her fall in love with him even more. The hero did not understand Angelica, and then she said that people were right when they called him Gallant Keisuke. The hero replied that he did not know about such a nickname, to which the girl replied that everyone called him that. The guy put plates of food on the table, and they began to eat. The girl tried one piece and said that the main character was very good at cooking. She realized that her new father made her happier. Nakamoto replied that a good daughter should help her father with household chores. Nakamoto took only a pillow for himself and gave the girls a blanket and put it on the bed. She said that if he had nothing to do, then they should make a baby. The main character said to shut up and go to sleep. The moon was not full, and it was rising above the main character's house. He had been sleeping for a long time, covered with his jacket. The heroes began to dream about something. There were many questions. Why Elsa? Because she was everything to him. Maybe there was someone more worthy than him. The main character hoped that she was being treated well. Having gotten out of bed, Angelica, still sleepy, thought that she needed to go to the bathroom. The girl walked along the apartment and, having reached the room where the door was open, thought that this was the place for her. There were a lot of different buttons on the panel. Although the main character explained everything to her, she still did not fully understand. Noticing the bidet button, she thought that this was exactly what she needed. Rubbing her eyes with the back of her hand, she went back to bed. But a little later, she fixed her gaze on the main character. There he was, sleeping rather restlessly and calling for Elsa in his sleep. Angelica was surprised. She squatted down opposite the main character and, propping her chin up with her palms, looked directly at the guy. The girl reached out to him and licked Nakamoto's face with her tongue, and she felt a salty taste. These were tears. She decided that tomorrow, when they got up, she would ask the hero to teach her how to use a bidet. And in the end, she called him father. Bidet is translated from French as a pony, that is, you need to spread your legs on it, so it is translated this way. Initially, it was banned in France in the 17th century, and after that, it became popular in southern Europe. And it is filled with either cold or warm water, used to wash all areas of the lower body, and is also sometimes used to wash the legs. Currently, the fifth can be used as a moon for men and women. In Japan, heated water began to be introduced in toilets in the 1980s. Initially, it was intended exclusively for washing women's underwear. It was a Japanese innovation. Warm water directed by a stream brought comfort, especially to women, which most men did not even suspect. Angelica, blushing deeply, ran 2 fingers over her tongue and licked them. The men really didn't know much. She called Nakamoto's name, trying to wake him up, sitting next to him on all fours. Realizing that he was still asleep, she clapped her hands and decided to handle it herself. Standing up, she went into the bathroom, opened the toilet lid, and looked inside. The girl's cheeks were burning with embarrassment. Her nerves were taking their toll. But she was determined to try the bidet. Sunlight came through the window into the room. The main character was still sleeping, mooing occasionally. Suddenly, he jumped up and shouted out a name. Elsa! He was breathing heavily. His forehead was covered in sweat. He felt like he was having nightmares, but he couldn't remember them. One thing was clear. He was dreaming about Elsa again. Trying to come to his senses, he went to the bathroom to wash his face. He turned on the tap and splashed cold water on his face. Looking in the mirror, he thought he looked terrible, a real devil. If a girl saw him like this, she would definitely be upset. Looking away, he noticed Angelique, who was looking at him with wide eyes. Nakamoto froze and asked, "How did she end up here?" The girl began to explain, crossing her hands between her thighs. With great embarrassment, he patiently explained that in Japanese apartments, the toilet and the bath are one room, so if someone is already there, they should make sure the other knows about it. The girl nodded, smiling, and said that she understood. Nakamoto mentally reproached himself. The girl should have told him that he was in the bathroom. Having already left the room, he shouted from behind the door, apologizing. He had no right to do this. In response, Angelica assured him that everything was fine, but jokingly added that in that case, she should also look at him. He exclaimed that this would not happen. Muffled sounds came from the bathroom. The walls were too thin. The hero covered his ears with his hands, convincing himself that he heard nothing, and then the girl's voice was heard. Blushing deeply, she said with delight that it was magnificent. Clenching her fists, she sighed with pleasure, admiring the power of the water flow. Having mastered the toilet and bidet, Angelica was in a good mood for the rest of the day. All this time she played with the stop button, as if she had discovered a new miracle. She giggled happily and kept exploring all the functions. The protagonist watched this with irritation. He was still unable to use the toilet in his own house. Suddenly, Angelica jumped out of the bathroom and pounced on him with delight while he was calmly shaving with an electric razor. He put his hand on her face and asked her tiredly what was wrong. She enthusiastically told him how wonderful the room was and accused him of eavesdropping. Then she asked if he used a bidet while bathing. Nakamoto couldn't resist and grabbed the girl by the hair. In response, she blushed and whispered that he was a genius. She continued to praise it, delighted by the technology. When asked why she could no longer use a bidet, Angelica explained that, on the contrary, she was delighted. This thing could change everything, make a revolution. She was flushed with embarrassment as she said this. Sweat was running down her face as she stammered that it was the perfect feeling. She didn't understand how women managed without this feature, because it was so easy to get used to. Throwing herself on the bed, she continued to reflect on the severity of her former life. She had been taught cleanliness since childhood, so, according to her, it was easier for her to accept these feelings. Pressing her hand to her mouth, she quietly said that, as long as the hero was nearby, there would be someone who would not be able to resist such a temptation. She tried to explain that she wanted to experience many things and go through difficulties. It was not an addiction, but just a resentment that she felt. The protagonist was completely confused and did not understand what she was talking about. He jokingly suggested that she had a lot of experience using a bidet and added that his bidet was the best. But deep down, he began to doubt. Is this virgin as innocent as she claims? Leaving Angelica in the room, Nakamoto told her in a reserved manner that she should now allow him to use the bathroom. He thought about her behavior. Perhaps such free manners were explained by her origin. The habits could be too different, especially in a new world for her. Entering the bathroom, he decided to look into her status. Opening the stats window, he saw full details of Angelica. It felt a little intrusive and even alarming. He didn't want to dwell on it. The first thing that caught his eye was her astonishing physical attributes. She was level 30 and belonged to the class of sacred maids. Her skills included perception, intuition, and magic. Thinking back to how she had withstood his push, he realized that she had probably activated a defensive barrier. Her rear guard skill exceeded 700 points, a perfect complement to her healing. With such abilities, they could become a sensation in business or even on television. However, he knew that there were risks involved, and he did not want to repeat the same mistakes. While he was in the bathroom, it occurred to him that a quiet and calm life as an ordinary person was the best choice. After he washed his hands and dried them with a towel, he was determined to test her abilities. He called her name. Angelica responded immediately, asking what happened. She spoke quite loudly, and Nakamoto told her not to shout, or else the neighbor would start to complain. Silence reigned in response. He sat down on the bed next to the girl and explained that their neighbor was irritable, so it was better to speak more quietly. Angelica watched his expression with slight caution. When he asked her to use the perception skill, she moved closer and began to feel his cheeks with her fingers. He repeated the request. He wanted her to activate the ability once more. Over the course of a week, rumors of ghosts wrapped in sheets began to appear in the building. The girl asked in surprise if this world was really filled with spirits. The hero, lowering his voice, said that there were no ghosts or supernatural things here. This was an ordinary world. In this dimension, as the priest said, not even magic exists. Angelica remarked that she was bored here. To this, Nakamoto objected that the world was not so bad. For example, there was a bidet here, which she liked so much. The girl blushed deeply and declared that she was not at all delighted with the bidet. Unexpectedly, she asked him if there were no spirits in this world, why was he looking for them? He replied that it might be a mistake, but he decided to check anyway. After all, what he saw really did look like a ghost. He was sure that something had appeared in Japan in the last few days and was now hiding in this building. Angelica noted with bewilderment that she had only arrived here today. It had been less than 10 hours since she had arrived. She lay her head on his lap and watched him as he considered. He had told her he wanted to give her a gift and suggested she choose one herself, perhaps clothes or a date. He glanced at the girl and stopped at the clothes. Angelica said with a smile that it was not that important, but could he ask her a question? The hero agreed, and she asked if he thought the name Angelica was too long. He picked her up, sat her upright, and asked how she would like him to call her. After several attempts, he settled on Angeli. He also asked her to call him by his name. The girl bowed and replied that for her, he would always be Hira. Nakamoto became serious and said that he did not like the way she called him. The girl understood this and began to call him Daddy. The hero nodded, noting that she was an obedient girl. Then Angelica stood up and solemnly said that it was time to begin. She extended her hand forward, and a magical symbol appeared in the air. Sacred Maid Angelica activated her perception skill. Magic circles and patterns flickered around her. This ability consumed 3 mana every second. When she finished, the hero asked what she had managed to find out. The girl, embarrassed, advised him to think about moving. She felt something evil nearby. According to her, the presence of something sinister was too obvious. The dead could appear at any moment. When asked about evil spirits, she replied that she was not sure. She simply felt evil energy with her perception. Finally, with obvious anxiety in her voice, she admitted that she did not feel comfortable in this house. Nakamoto got out of bed, thanked her, and said he would do the rest himself. He stretched his shoulders, preparing for action. A magic circle appeared under his feet. Angelica turned pale and screamed at him to stop, because he shouldn't do that. The protagonist closed his eyes, concentrated, stretched out his arms, and began to attract something invisible. He was completely concentrated. Opening one eye, he folded his hands into a complex magical sign and began to read the spell. In an instant, a sacred circle flared up beneath Angelica's feet, and her scream pierced the air, filling the room with tension. Meanwhile, Rio, the same girl Nakamoto had recently encountered, felt a strange agitation and began looking around as if something had made her wary. The man with the scar on his face, smoking a cigarette, jerked his head up. He said in surprise what it was, then handed the money to one of his henchmen and told him to buy the necessary things. Opening the trunk of the car, he hoarsely said that when it all started, no one would stop him. He was going to teach a lesson. He added that Rio would definitely not sleep that night. Inside the trunk lay a tied-up guy with his mouth taped shut, unconscious. The man stroked his head and whispered that everything would be fine and that they would enjoy something. At this time, Nakamoto asked Angelica what had happened to her, because she had screamed too loudly. The girl, sobbing, called him Daddy, and said that after what he had done, he was now obliged as a father. The hero didn't understand what exactly she meant. Angelica sat in front of him, flushed, with tears in her eyes, completely confused. It was the same Angelica, but now in the form of a new student. She had just transferred to school, and this was her first day. Inside, she hoped to make friends with her classmates, and perhaps even find the one who would become her future husband. She, dressed in a school uniform, awkwardly walked down the corridor and suddenly stumbled, falling to the floor. The skirt and high socks did not save her from abrasions on her knees. She leaned her back against the wall, clenching her lips in pain through tears. Nakamoto came out from around the corner, noticed her, and asked what happened. Why such a cute girl was covered in blood. Angelica, slightly blushing, said that she was used to this kind of thing, and there was no need to worry. He asked again, was everything really okay? He said that such soft skin should not leave traces of wounds. He picked her up in his arms and told her to follow him. A moment later, the girl was lying on the bed, hugging her knees. Nakamoto reassured her that the school had the best doctors and everything would be fine. He told her not to worry. He stroked her head gently, and she blushed. All of this turned out to be her memories, a scene from the past, and the magic that Nakamoto was using now reminded her of the same one from that day. Nakamoto admitted with surprise that he had not considered this magic so important. The sacred circle he had summoned was indeed special. The girl, blushing, explained that it was a special type of magic known to everyone. She added that such circles are used in battle to protect an important person or a loved one. It requires great strength, and the magician often falls unconscious after using it. And she asked, didn't he spend magical energy for her? The hero admitted that her embarrassment had rubbed off on him. The girl touched his hand and said with a smile that he was being overprotective of her, and then called him father. Nakamoto replied that he was doing this because he cared. He apologized and went to make breakfast. When everything was ready, Angelica quickly ate the food, and with a satisfied smile, declared that it was delicious. She added that her father was, as always, kind to her. But in her thoughts, she admitted to herself, she was happy with him and dreamed of becoming his wife. While Nakamoto was trimming his nails, sitting nearby, he thought about his job. The restaurant requires neatness, and unshaven or unkempt hands are unacceptable. Turning to Angelica, he noticed that her face was burning. He asked if taking care of her nails seemed strange. The girl shook her head and said that it was something else. Suddenly, she reached for the cord on her chest and began to untie it. She said sheepishly that since he was grooming himself, it meant he intended to do it tonight. Angelica continued, allowing herself a cheeky tone, and added that she would not resist. At that moment, a palm flew across her face. Nakamoto slapped her, she, pretending to be in pain, screamed. Although in reality there was no pain, she only said that he was kind, and that she liked him. Continuing to talk nonsense, she brought the hero to the extreme degree of embarrassment. He screamed at her to shut up. At this cry, Angelica recoiled and fell silent, looking at him in bewilderment. Nakamoto abruptly left the apartment, slamming the door behind him. Sitting on the steps outside, he was tormented by his thoughts. Why was his daughter behaving like this? Was this normal for a holy virgin? He thought her clothes were too revealing. Literally everything was see-through. He told himself that he should not give in. He was a father. He should not think about her like this. He had to keep a cool head. Returning to the apartment, he called Angelica and sternly told her not to come out until she changed into normal clothes. Clothes that belonged to this world. The girl, blushing, put her finger to her chin and asked if they were really going to lock her up. Nakamoto explained that he was doing this so that the police wouldn't arrest her for indecent exposure. After all, no one knew what people would think if they saw her in such an outfit. Nakamoto said that as soon as he had some free time, he wanted to look for information about possible ghosts in this building. Angelica flatly refused. Suddenly, he remembered that he hadn't showered since the previous day. He decided to use magic so that she wouldn't notice. It would be easier. A few seconds later, Angelica was surprised to see that he was wearing different clothes. She asked if he had changed, and noticed that his face had turned red. Nakamoto waved it off, saying that it was just his imagination. He assured her that she shouldn't think anything strange, because he was her father. But Angelica narrowed her eyes and asked with distrust if he had something in mind. Crossing his arms over his chest, he confidently stated that he was there solely to protect her. Then he asked her to repeat the word father out loud. The blonde looked at him with a sly but sweet smile. And meanwhile, he realized how pleasant it was becoming to communicate with this girl. She laughed at his stupid jokes, knew how to cheer him up, and he began to understand why people visit Kibakura, despite the fact that he himself had never been there. Jumping out of bed, he said that, by and large, it doesn't matter what his job is. He's part of society, and therefore he makes his contribution. And if everyone tries, we can help each other. Angelica, her eyes shining, said he was simply amazing. These words excited him, and he suggested that she use her language comprehension skills to try reading a book. He also informed her that he had prepared some food and that she could go ahead and eat as much as she wanted. The girl responded happily, her cheeks flushed. The hero reached out to stroke her head and thought that perhaps she did have a docile side. But suddenly he froze. He remembered that a few days ago on TV they said that girls don't like it when you stroke their heads. But Angelica was special. He wondered how she would react. She noticed his confusion, looked at him questioningly, and asked if he wanted to touch her. He answered sharply that he hadn't meant that at all. With an unperturbed expression, he headed for the door and said he was leaving. He told Angelique to be a good girl. She cheerfully wished him a good day, promising to do everything right. Nakamoto sat down on the step to tie his sneakers. He thought that today he would try not to break any plates, otherwise he would have to look for work again. At that moment, Angelica came up from behind. He called her, but she was already standing next to him. The girl came closer and kissed him on the cheek, wishing him a good day and saying that she believed in him. He ran out of the house, flushed to the ears, overcome with emotion. As he leaped the steps, he felt capable of anything. This was going to be a great day. However, in reality, everything went differently. At work, his boss yelled at him, demanding an explanation how he was going to compensate for the damage. The hero, swearing, promised that he would not allow this to happen again. But today he had already managed to break 4 plates. However, the fault was not only his. The number of workers had decreased from 4 to 3, and now the manager was dumping the entire volume on him. The manager's own behavior, which was incapable of admitting mistakes, added to the problems. He blamed Nakamoto in front of everyone. This was a habitual pressure scheme. Every time the manager raised his voice, Angelica's smile would appear before Nakamoto's eyes. It filled him with calm and gave him strength. He felt himself blushing, but he kept smiling. That was his daughter's strength. He knew he had to find a job that would allow him to use his best qualities. The manager was still shouting, mixing dough in a large bowl. He threw a phrase in the hero's face that someone like him would die alone and never have a family. With anger in his eyes, he ordered him to leave. Nakamoto looked at him in confusion, not understanding what had happened. He went into the locker room and began to change. No one would hire him, and he had to get a job at this eatery. Despite the injustice, he was not rude to the manager. He felt grateful for being hired. He decided to change his mood and think positively. Since he had some free time, he could go shopping. He knew that this would please Angelica. She said that she loved walks. He wanted to take care of her so that she would not worry about anything. Continuing to walk through the city, he reached a lingerie store. Nakamoto stared at the shop window, dumbfounded. The thought that he, a 32-year-old bachelor, needed to buy women's underwear was an internal resistance. However, his mind told him that it was necessary. After all, Angelica had been wearing the same clothes for 2 days already. There was a 24-hour store nearby, and he decided that he had to muster up courage, even if it was enormous. In his mind's eye, he saw people looking at him with disapproval, commenting on his clothes and the fact that he might be wearing underwear under his armor. He saw himself in a wide field, wearing only his underwear, the object of everyone's attention and ridicule. A feeling of loneliness washed over him. Beads of sweat were running down his face, and his head was spinning with nervous tension. He put his palm to his forehead and thought that he wasn't sure he could handle this. He was tempted to put it off until tomorrow. But in front of the mental image of Angelica, looking like a well-groomed cat, he decided that it would be more humane to buy her underwear as soon as possible. He looked at his hand, then clenched it into a fist and thought, was what he was doing really abnormal? He had lost Elsa in the most painful way. Now he had only one thing left to do: prove that he could be a good father. Walking confidently down the sidewalk, he told himself that there was nothing wrong with being a caring daddy. Suddenly, his gaze caught on a familiar building, the same gaming center where the fight had taken place the day before. He wondered how the boy he had punched was feeling, and especially what had happened to the girl who looked incredibly like Elsa. The doors of the center opened, and the same girl came out. She noticed him immediately. Nakamoto decided that it was not worth interfering and tried to leave, hoping to remain unnoticed. He told himself that this spendthrift girl had no meaning for him. She was to be avoided. But behind him he heard a sigh and someone grabbed his sleeve. It was her. She asked him to wait, noting that he walked too quickly. Nakamoto asked coldly what she wanted from him, and whether she was going to apologize for yesterday. The girl answered that she wanted to apologize, but to do it differently. She took a breath and, looking into his eyes, asked who he was. After all, what happened was not normal. She said that Leo, that same guy, had his wounds healed at an incredible speed, and new teeth had already begun to grow. Nakamoto jokingly said that Leo was nothing less than the king of beasts, because only he was capable of such regeneration. The power of a wild animal, he added, operates by its own rules. Slightly embarrassed, she asked if he really did it, and if he had supernatural powers. The hero looked at her calmly and shook his head. Tears welled up in the girl's eyes and she screamed for him to wait. She bowed low, asking for forgiveness. Everything that happened the day before was her fault, and she knew it. She apologized again, trying to show sincerity. The hero began to get irritated. He asked what she was trying to achieve. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. But the girl started talking about Leo and asked for help. He only noted that she was brave, since she came alone. She explained that Leo was not her boyfriend, but her brother. More precisely, not her biological brother. They had different fathers. The hero reluctantly replied that if he did not touch his teeth, they would grow on their own. There was nothing to worry about. He said goodbye and got ready to leave, but the girl stopped him, saying that he was lying. It wasn't about his brother's wounds. They were healing. She spoke quickly and incoherently, as if she didn't believe her own words. But she felt that Nakamoto was not human. He was looking for her. The hero frowned and answered seriously that coincidences happen. When the girl was about to say something, he interrupted her, saying that everything was fine, but that place was bothering him. Rio looked at him nervously, and he pointed to the stain at her feet and added with a grin that yesterday, this was exactly where she sat. And teased her. Was it her mark? She blushed and screamed and began to kick that very spot furiously. The hero chuckled to himself, admiring her temperament. Then she asked if they could get down to business. He replied that she shouldn't be embarrassed by this. After all, it was all just physiology. Blushing, she suggested that they sit down and talk calmly. He ordered them to speak right away, and she began her story. The hero thought he could get a small reward for his help. When he heard her story, he demanded a reasonable fee. Soon they were standing in front of a tall building. They decided to head to the Yakuza office. Nakamoto felt a little tense, and Ryo was still blushing. It was his duty to help her. And, frankly, it seemed a lot less awkward than buying lingerie for Angelica. Meanwhile, in an office at the top of the building, a man with a cigarette in his mouth, his feet up on the desk, calmly stared at the ceiling. While Nakamoto was busy with important matters outside the house, Angelica remained in the apartment. She sat on the floor, all red with embarrassment, and could not understand what was happening to her. Unable to bear it any longer, she took his sweater out of the laundry basket and held it to her face. Inhaling the familiar scent, the girl sighed languidly. Her thoughts were confused. The scent was driving her crazy, and the feeling of ruined clothes only increased her confusion. She could no longer continue in this state. Meanwhile, Ryo, another girl, was hoping for Nakamoto's help. She told him that her mother had a new man named Gondo, the man with the scar across his face. According to her, her mother used to be different, but every 4 years or so, she seemed to turn into a different person. Ryo spoke with disdain that Gondo was a narrow-minded, almost stupid person. She constantly repeated this out loud when she was around Nakamoto. Ever since she entered high school, every man her mother brought home began to look at her with lust. Every time she came out of the shower, their gazes became sticky, and some even allowed themselves to touch. Nakamoto, listening to all this, felt how this story was starting to tire him. But Ryo continued. She said that in those moments, Leo was always by her side. If someone tried to cross the line, her brother would immediately intervene. He took responsibility for her safety. However, with Gondo, everything was different. He was aggressive, pestering her, asking her to change clothes in front of him, touching her, and even taking pictures. And he did it secretly, so that Leo would not notice. All this had been going on for a long time. With tears in her eyes, Ryo admitted that she was on the edge. She could no longer tolerate what was happening. Nakamoto asked her about yesterday, whether the sound of the phone she heard was related to it. She nodded. Gondo tried to touch her again. Leo wanted to intervene, but he couldn't follow through. He was stopped. He lost. And Ryo added that Leo had never lost before. The hero asked if she thought all this was his fault. There were still tears in her eyes, but she smiled a little evilly. She said that yes, it was his fault. At that moment, Gondo grabbed Leo by the neck and began to strangle him. His gaze was as dark as night, and there was not an ounce of sympathy in his smile. Leo went limp, unable to resist. After that, they put him in the trunk of a car and drove away. Nakamoto frowned and asked if Leo was dead. Ryo screamed that no, he was alive. Then the hero asked if she had contacted the police. Ryo nodded affirmatively, but no help came. One of the policemen only told her to say hello to her stepfather. She realized the entire police force was working for Gondo. The hero noted with a frown that she was asking him to attack a Yakuza office. Ryo admitted that she was nervous and unsure if it was even possible. He stopped her with a look. He didn't have much strength. The girl clenched her fists, apologizing. Nakamoto replied that he was not sure if her story would help, and that it could all be a trap set for revenge. He admitted that he couldn't win, especially if Gondo hurt him. The girl, looking away, reproached him for his lack of trust. While in the air, in Nakamoto's arms, she screamed that she was about to die. The boy, looking at her with displeasure through his wind-blown hair, assured her that she would be fine and asked her to trust him. She clarified his words and after a pause agreed. The hero, in turn, noticed that she was pressing too hard against him. Ryo exclaimed that she could not move away. She was simply afraid. He said that they were almost there. When they landed, the girl fell to her knees and pressed her forehead against the nearest fence. Turning to Nakamoto, she asked him to state his name, addressing him as Uncle. The guy, leaning his elbows on the fence, calmly said his name. The girl nodded, saying that his name was beautiful, and then introduced herself. She added that he probably already knew her name. He confirmed that he had said Leo. Ryo looked at Nakamoto with interest and asked how he knew her brother's name. The hero tensed up, but tried to hide it. He tried to avoid answering, saying that it was not that important, and added that it was time for them to move on. Inside, he was wondering what kind of girl this was. Much more honest, sensitive, and sincere than she seemed at first glance. In front of them stood a building with a high concrete wall topped with metal wire. There were many surveillance cameras hanging on the wall. It was a Yakuza office. Nakamoto noted how strange such a building looked in an ordinary residential area. He wanted to get this over with and go home. But Ryo, judging by the obsessive look in her eyes, was clearly going to go with him. This baffled him. The girl looked at him seriously, pointed her finger at the building and said that they should go. But Nakamoto grabbed her sleeve and asked her to wait. He firmly stated that she could not go with him and ordered her to stay outside. Ryo asked, surprised, why he did not want to take her with him. She assured him that she was strong enough and added that he probably just did not take her because she was a woman. She began to get angry and insistently demanded an explanation. Nakamoto began to lose patience, finding her terribly stubborn. When he tried to stop her again, Ryo pushed his hand away and said that she would go anyway. After all, they had to save Leo. At that moment, Elsa appeared before his eyes. He screamed, told Ryo to shut up and stay where she was, told her to listen to the adults. Realizing he had raised his voice, he covered his mouth with his hand and felt he had gone too far. Ryo didn't respond, but her face began to turn red. Embarrassed, with a downcast look, she agreed and squeezed out a barely audible, "Okay." Nakamoto was taken aback by her reaction. He blushed, told her to stay there, and went ahead himself. Inside, he wondered if he had found some kind of switch that affected the girl's behavior. He easily destroyed the security cameras, then jumped so high that he cleared the fence. Ryo, watching this, thought that he was definitely not human. The inside of the building was much more spacious than he expected. He moved carefully, trying not to make noise, and thought about how to quickly find Leo. Suddenly, a man appeared from around the corner and put a gun to his temple. He called Nakamoto buddy and asked what he was doing there. Armed people began to peek out from all the rooms. The man added that it would be better for the hero to get to know the gun better. If he did not want to try lead, then it was time to leave. Within minutes, almost all of the bandits were lying on the floor, some unconscious, some writhing in pain. They had one thing in common. They were all pretty battered. Holding one of the guns, Nakamoto thought that with Ryo by his side, all of this would be much more difficult. It was harder to defend than to attack. The bullets did not harm him. He approached the one holding the gun to him and asked where Gondo was. The bloody and battered man chuckled and said that the hero seemed to be looking for death. Nakamoto replied that he could not stand such cliched threats. The man with an almost completely shaved head said through gritted teeth that if the hero had a woman, he would kidnap her and do whatever he wanted with her. He warned that he should be prepared for this. Nakamoto, with dark eyes, stepped on his knee without warning. The man screamed in pain. The hero coldly said that he had broken the plate again, and then promised that for this bandit, everything was just beginning. He threatened to burn his eyes, not physically, but with pain that he would remember forever. Fire began to burst from his finger, and he added that he was not obliged to heal him afterwards. In a calm but threatening tone, he again demanded to know where Gondo was. The man fearfully exclaimed for him to stop and promised to tell him everything. The hero also asked about the schoolboy with piercings and blonde hair. Hearing confirmation, he realized that Leo was here. Nakamoto was about to leave, but hoarsely added that he would not use recovery magic. He wanted the man to suffer. At this time, Gondo, hearing the noise in the building, irritably shouted at his subordinates to shut up. He wanted to rest, but at that very moment, a hand crashed through the door to his office. Gondo flinched and tensed, realizing that something had gone wrong. Nakamoto felt for the lock, turned it, and the door swung open. As he entered the room, he knocked on the doorframe, as if imitating a polite knock, and said that he was entering. Gondo was in a panic. He was confused, opened his mouth, but could not utter a word. Nakamoto, looking straight at him, more assertive than asking, made it clear who he considered this man. Sitting on the couch, Gondo could not comprehend what was happening, and asked the hero if he was taking any drugs, and what he needed. Nakamoto made it clear that he had come to take Leo, the son of the Saito family. He told Gondo to stay away from his sister, leave their mother alone, and forget the way to their home. The hero grabbed Gondo by the collar and lifted him into the air. He screamed that he had nothing to do with these children. But Nakamoto, seething with rage, demanded that Leo be brought immediately. He finished his sentence with contempt, noting that it was unmanly to behave like that. Immediately after that night came back to him, and he convinced himself again that it was self-defense. He asked Gondo if he would fulfill his demand. He confirmed that he would not return to that house. and asked if he would be okay if he gave up the child. Nakamoto frowned and remarked, "If he really agreed, then why did he hide the stun gun?" The man grinned vilely and, without answering, launched the device into the hero's body. Gondo was confident of victory, but Nakamoto didn't even flinch. The man didn't understand why the blow didn't work. Nakamoto threw him to the floor and told him that neither tasers nor bullets worked on him. His magical barrier made such attempts useless. Gondo now finally decided that he was facing a crazy drug addict. Suddenly, Gondo jumped onto the back of the sofa, quickly moved to the wall where the weapons were hanging, and took a sword from there. He called one of his subordinates and ordered him to bring Leo, supposedly to cut off his head. The room filled with armed men. Calling the hero Superman, Gondo asked if the situation had changed now. Nakamoto warned him that if he harmed Leo, Rio would hate him. Gondo just laughed. He said that it was Rio who had called the hero. Then, with open disgust, he said that he would strip her, make her his plaything, and if Nakamoto was a good boy, maybe he would share. He demanded that Rio be brought to him, promising to spare the hero. Gondo was sure that he was mentally unstable, but suddenly his face distorted, his eyes rolled back. Nakamoto activated a powerful ability. It consumed 2000 MP, activated only twice, and lasted 180 seconds. At that moment, the weapons in the hands of all the bandits cracked and shattered. With one swing, Nakamoto cut off Gondo's hand. He approached the bag where Leo was being held, and, opening it, he was convinced that it was the boy in front of him. Leo opened his eyes and recognized the man he had met yesterday at the game center. He asked him why he was there. Nakamoto told him to thank his sister, who had arranged everything. Turning to Gondo, Nakamoto asked if he understood everything now. He noted that he could restore his arm, but admitted that he was an evil man and did not think it was necessary. Gondo began to beg for help. Then the hero added that his words could be misinterpreted. Nakamoto explained that the arm could indeed grow back, but the pain of losing it would return again and again until Gondo went mad. He asked if he was willing to listen to his request. Gondo nodded piteously. Nakamoto walked out of the building, holding Leo by his arm. Rio, seeing them, rushed towards them with tears in her eyes and hugged them. At that moment, his status was updated. Points for winning were awarded, fatherhood efficiency was improved. The level of his relationship with Rio increased. Now, even the marriage option was available. However, the hero himself, looking at this message, thought that he absolutely did not want to appoint Rio as his wife. A girl with blonde hair is urgently saying something to a man with dark hair, who is standing with his back to her. She asks if he understood anything. Two characters discuss a girl who is harmless without magic but has a corrupted heart. One worries, the other reassures. Two characters collide with each other. The first character, wearing glasses and a headband, begins to speak. The second character reacts with raised hands and a surprised expression. The boy is sitting on the floor, looking unwell, and the girl is standing next to him, worried. A third person asks if he is sick and suggests that he rest, but the boy insists that he is fine. The scene shows concern and worry about his condition. The point: the boy refuses to rest, despite being sick. The male character raises one finger, trying to explain something calmly. Beads of sweat visible on his face. A woman in glasses looks down, wearing an apron. She talks about her father having a similar condition, and mentions Mr. Nakamoto. A young woman with short hair and glasses addresses another woman, asking about a child. The other woman, wearing a scarf, responds by asking about her identity. A woman with long hair and a bow tied at the back of her dress is confronted by two surprised people. One is sitting and the other is standing, wearing glasses and a scarf. She says she has never seen a person sitting before. The girl with glasses adjusts them as she talks. She suggests that the situation may look different and be a mistake. The scene focuses on her careful observation. One character wearing glasses persistently questions another about their relationship with a man named Nakamoto, demanding clarity about who they are and the nature of their connection. The girl in glasses asks her interlocutor a direct and intense question about her relationship with Mr. Nakamoto, asking if it is physical or romantic. The question shocks the girl, whose face shows sweat and surprise. The moment of confrontation over personal relationships is clearly felt. Two young people prepare to leave a room, exchanging farewells. The young man waves his hand, and the girl assures that they will return. The dialogue confirms their departure and future visit. A young man and woman sit and talk near a large window in a sparse room with tables. Angelique mentions that she thought something was a higher demon. She is told that it was scary, although it was an ordinary person. A short conversation reveals their thoughts on a frightening event involving a person. The young man with dark hair looks surprised and asks if the sensory skill is creating such a sound. His expression shows surprise and curiosity. A girl with short hair and a plaid scarf talks about feeling the energy around her, asks about a similar sensation in the room, and comments on its nature. Two young people are talking. Angelique, a girl in a headscarf and a checkered scarf, says one word, and Nakamoto, a dark-haired young man in a jacket, asks a question about comparing events. The gist. The young people are discussing a recurring event. Angelica explains how the energy around them changes from white to black when there are normal or evil spirits nearby, describing the change in the perception of the aura. Nakamoto appears thoughtful and slightly worried, touching his head. He wonders if it is right to use the sacred circle, noting that it now reacts to ordinary people. There is a dilemma in the air about power and its impact on others. Nakamoto and Angelica stand next to each other. The girl says that her skill's accuracy may have dropped, and the guy notes that it doesn't work the way she wants it to. The gist. They discuss the skill's reliability. The young people are chatting in a room, sitting on chairs opposite each other. Nakamoto praises his interlocutor's work, suggesting a break. Angelica questions the unexpected compliment, denying any intention to flatter. Angelica is a girl with blonde hair and heart-shaped pupils, raising her hand with 3 fingers. She smiles and wears a checkered scarf. One speech bubble warns not to say that. Another asks if someone is trying to be erotic. Gist. Girl reacts to a comment about him being erotic. Nakamoto offers to eat before the food gets cold. He holds a bun and speaks with a smile, inviting them to join him. The scene focuses on the gesture of offering and inviting them to eat. Angelica holds food in her hands, showing it to the young man. She explains or shows how to eat it. Nakamoto asks how to eat it. Outside, the sky is clear and blue with clouds, and the sun is shining brightly. A young man is thinking about an imaginary, everyday life in Japan. Nakamoto is thinking about what life would be like if he always lived there. On the table sits a partially eaten tray of French fries and a drink with a straw. Dialogue bubbles appear from above, with introspective thoughts discussing life choices and alternative realities. The air is one of contemplation of personal destiny and normalcy. There is a baby with a pacifier in the stroller, and the text explains that the young man is returning to a world where his classmate was married and had a family with a daughter. The rain falls continuously, creating a gloomy atmosphere. The young man reflects on the loss of the woman he loved, Elsa, who died without leaving a child, leaving behind only memories. Nakamoto feels empty without property or hope. The shirtless young man says he has no right to start all over again, and Angelica, turning away, says everything is fine. Nakamoto insists he has no objections. Angelica smiles softly as she eats a snack, glasses on her head. The moment speaks of Angelica's youth and unspoiled future. The message highlights Angelica's hope and potential. Shadows of a man and woman appear on a textured background, the man holding a child. The text suggests that Angelique must either connect with a man of her own age or have a child. It says that this future is unattainable for her. Nakamoto and Angelica walk down a narrow city street filled with tall buildings and traffic lights. The young priestess reaches out to the young man, calling him Daddy. She thinks about trying harder for him, Nakamoto. A young woman wearing glasses and an elaborate dress stands next to another man outside a building. She questions the purpose of their visit and the nature of the place they have come to. The dialogue reveals uncertainty about their location and intentions. Angie, holding a checkered scarf, notices that someone looks a little scary. She looks calm but slightly concerned as she makes a comment about the other's appearance. 2 speech bubbles show a short conversation, assuring that all is well and urging not to worry. In the center is a jagged vertical sign with Japanese characters, framed by tiled walls, suggesting an interior or station setting. The man with the scar on his face straightens his white tie. He clamps a cigar between his teeth, and the smoke rises upward. He asks the young people about their visit. Nakamoto stands firm, and Angelique hides behind him, nervously clutching his jacket. He asks if she came here to improve herself. The scene focuses on their interaction and body language. Gondo examines his fingers, while Angie and Nakamoto watch. The man asks to ask something, stating that he is about to do something that the world considers evil. The scene conveys an intent to challenge norms. Gondo leans on the table, asking what will happen if he says no. Nakamoto stands next to him, clenching his fists. The conversation turns to difficult choices. A young man with serious eyes declares that he must show little Angie his cruelty so that she will hate him. Gondo, with a stern expression, clutches a cigarette between his fingers as he speaks. He sweats slightly, showing signs of stress or anger. He demands to know what the young man wants from him. Nakamoto speaks harshly to an off-camera interlocutor, calling him his dog and questioning his loyalty within some government context. Gondo sits with a confident posture while talking to Nakamoto off-camera. He mentions that he knows a few people he knows and asks what Nakamoto wants from him. The younger man remarks that he sounds weak when he speaks like that. Nakamoto looks forward and speaks in a serious tone. He asks Gondo about a possible spy in the government, calling him his dog and saying he misunderstood something. Gist. Nakamoto accuses the other person of misunderstanding and asks about the government spy. Gondo stands, holding a cigarette in one hand, talking to Nakamoto, whose leg is visible in the frame. He mentions that he has some acquaintances and asks what he wants from him. Gondo notices that Nakamoto's tone makes him seem weak. Nakamoto places his hand on the young girl's head as he speaks, asking for his interlocutor's identification. Gondo speaks with a cigarette in his mouth. He says that Nakamoto has killer eyes and doesn't look like a worker. Gist. A man comments on someone's intense gaze and appearance. A young man and a young woman stand in a room. Nakamoto ponders the importance of identification and the age of his companion, indicating a casual conversation about identity. Angelica holds his hand in silence. A young man in a suit leans against the counter, smoking and speaking in a serious tone. He says something that casts doubt on the refusal. There is tension in the air. The young man turns to Nakamoto and Anji with a mocking smile. He asks if he understands and explains that he is not working for free after the recent events and refuses. Gondo sweats and speaks carefully about the difficulties of obtaining documents. He admits that he needs the help of a strong man. The scene focuses on negotiations and challenges. Nakamoto stands in the room, looking forward. Angelica clings to his arm from behind. The large hand is clenched in the foreground. Beads of sweat are visible on the hand, indicating tension or stress. Gondo states that he wants someone, making it a condition for the conversation. Gondo speaks of mutual benefit and strength if Nakamoto becomes their fighter, offering to join forces. He leans forward with a slight smile as he begins his speech. Nakamoto abruptly refuses to agree with Gondo and orders him to shut up and follow instructions. The conflict arises in a tense standoff. The speaker's voice is determined. Gondo says the negotiations are over, holding a gun. There is no response from Nakamoto. The atmosphere is tense. A tense standoff ensues between the two. Gondo challenges Nakamoto to kill him if he chooses. Gondo declares that he will kill, resurrect, and kill again. Nakamoto refuses to kill without proper permission. The two collide with tension and sweat. Gondo has issued a challenge to Nakamoto, trying to spur him on to more difficult action. The boy, in turn, reflects on the fact that he is hated, but seems hesitant. The point. A tense challenge has been issued, but it is met with reluctance. A close-up of a girl and a young man standing next to each other, showing their lower bodies. Angelica is wearing a skirt and stockings, and Nakamoto is wearing trousers. Angie notes that showing too much blood is not good for education. The point. Angie warns against excessive blood in an educational context. Nakamoto grabs a terrified Angelique, declaring that he has no choice but to become a demon. Intense speech bubbles emphasize his determination. The atmosphere is tense and determined. Gondo and Nakamoto discuss a smartphone. The young man shows off a hovering phone. Nakamoto, seeing Gondo's curiosity, allows him to take a quick look at the phone's screen. Gondo holds the photo and speaks firmly. He does not believe that the girl sent the photo herself and demands that he not be mocked. He calls the girl Rio. Gondo holds a phone, which displays an image of a girl lifting her shirt to reveal her breasts. The speech reveals a conflict of affection for this girl, in contrast to recent cold encounters. Gondo struggles with mixed feelings towards Rio, shown on the phone. A tense exchange ensues, with Gondo aggressively squeezing Nakamoto's hand, who looks slightly alarmed. Angie stands by, surprised. Gondo promises that the ID will be ready soon. Gondo straightens his tie and says that he has a heart and is trying to help the illegal girl. He mentions that he hasn't seen anything good in a long time and thanks someone. He asks Angie's age. Gondo praises Angelica's Japanese skills and asks if she is Nakamoto's daughter. The girl resolutely defends her father. The interlocutor reacts with surprise and interest. Gondo, smoking a cigarette, asks about the part-time job and the whereabouts of Nakamoto's wife. He then agrees that it is true and calls it impressive. Gondo asks if Nakamoto has married off his daughter, showing a tense expression on his face. Nakamoto explains that there is no physical intimacy between them. Angelica confirms this sadly. The conversation reveals the emotional distance in their relationship. Nakamoto notices that Angelica is acting differently than yesterday and addresses her. Angie clings to his jacket and asks what's wrong. Nakamoto points out her changed mood compared to yesterday. A close-up of Gondo with a serious expression and a scar across his right eye. Speech bubbles indicate a conversation about limited memory and recent days. Gondo discusses uncertainty and memories. Gondo and Nakamoto discuss the changes in one of them after the encounter with the ghost. Gondo confirms it. Nakamoto claims he has changed, leading to a business-like exchange of truths. Gondo recalls seeing a ghost in someone's house, which made him feel dizzy. He mentions that he came to his senses and found that Nakamoto was already there. The memories of the previous day seem like a dream to him. Angelica speaks thoughtfully. She admits that she feels completely collected, but feels that something is still moving inside her body. Angie admits that she feels confused despite this awareness. A conversation unfolds between Nakamoto and Gondo, discussing older students and a certain document. Gondo is asked to show his identification and explain his connection to Ryo's mother. A close-up of Gondo with a tear-stained face, showing a distressed expression with clenched teeth against a shadowed background. Gondo says that he wanted to get closer to Ryo. Gondo's intention is revealed in his statement. Two speech bubbles show a tense conversation about disinterest and virginity. The set shows a plain building facade with a security camera and a tall fence. The gist is that Gondo expresses a loss of interest and tells Nakamoto not to worry. Nakamoto looks tense and worried as he stands outside under a partly cloudy sky. Power lines are visible in the background. He thinks about Gondo, who should have died, and regrets having any sympathy for the man. Nakamoto explains that he is not a hero and asks what was done to Ryo. Angelique listens, arms crossed on the street under a cloudy sky. Close-up of Angelica asking a question. She stares at the listener as she speaks. She asks if Nakamoto put his hand on Ryo. The question is about physical contact with Ryo. Nakamoto looks surprised and slightly worried, looking down at the hand reaching out to him. Angelica asks him to show her the glowing board called a smartphone, previously shown to the entire century. Nakamoto and Angelica discuss Gondo mentioning Ryo after seeing something. Angie expresses curiosity about seeing Ryo on TV. Nakamoto explains the context of the mention. The conversation shows anticipation and curiosity about Ryo. Nakamoto and Angelique are standing outside under a partly cloudy sky. Angelique asks if Nakamoto has Ryo's contact on his smartphone. Angelique states that Nakamoto started taking his smartphone to the bathroom yesterday. The point is that Angelique is questioning Nakamoto's smartphone habits. Nakamoto considers telling Angelique that Ryo is his girlfriend, but thinks it's a stupid idea. He reflects on the failed threat that angered her. He sees it as a personal chance for Angelique to be disappointed in him. Angelica points forward, speaking seriously, asking Nakamoto to be prepared for a serious conversation when they return home. She appears determined and focused on the discussion ahead. Nakamoto looks surprised and slightly sweaty. He wonders why a certain memory or event suddenly pops into his mind. The point is that the sudden memory causes confusion. Nakamoto silently questions his words and intentions, wanting Angelica to hate him. He refuses to give his smartphone to Angelica, who is standing next to him, explaining that his eyesight deteriorates when looking at other people's devices, but states that there is nothing between him and Ryo. Two speech bubbles appear above the Japanese passport. One bubble asks whether Nakamoto used the passport for a specific purpose. The other bubble refers to the efforts the speaker has made towards Angelica. Nakamoto asks Angelica why she is angry and if she is playing with him. Angie insists that she is upset and is not playing. Angie clearly rejects Nakamoto's suggestion. Angelica looks away with a slightly surprised expression, holding her fingers to her lips. The dialogue suggests a playful or teasing exchange between the characters. Gist: the conversation shows light teasing and mixed feelings. Angie speaks enthusiastically, offering to return to her for a certain activity. She looks lively and determined. Nakamoto quickly agrees, responding enthusiastically. Nakamoto appears concerned and talks to Angelica. He advises her to be more restrained and warns her against doing certain things to her body. The young people engage in a brief exchange of remarks. Angelica asks if the object of their dialogue came from that world. Nakamoto suggests the possibility of his arrival. The gist. Nakamoto and Angelica discuss the origin of the third person. Angelica stands in a dimly lit room. She wears a checkered scarf over her school uniform and looks ahead with a serious expression. Nakamoto speaks calmly, advising that if someone wants to send more than one item, it is better to do it at the same time. Angelique lies on the couch, partially covered by a sheet, her eyes closed. Nakamoto is speaking nearby, talking about the priest's mistakes and how they could have sent both her and the ghost away at the same time. Nakamoto looks to his right and talks about seeing the ghost of a white woman last week. He looks serious and focused on the topic. Angelique stands in the room by the window. She listens as Nakamoto explains the details of her early arrival in Japan, the control of her spirit in the early days, and the death of her source of information. Angie processes the explanation and acknowledges its meaning. Nakamoto explains with a serious expression that the room does not have a normal smell, but has had a strange odor from the start. He says that someone must have stayed here for several days, causing a noticeable smell of death that will be difficult to get rid of. Angelica looks shocked and slightly worried. She wonders if everything is a lie, expressing disbelief as she looks at the glowing object in front of her. Summary. Angie is confronted with a painful truth. A close-up of Nakamoto speaks in 2 short sentences, denying something and comparing the situation to a past event related to his shift or movement. The tone seems serious and thoughtful. Angelique lies on the ground, held down by numerous tentacles wrapped around her limbs and torso. She wears a dress and appears to be immobilized. The text explains a method developed by a priest named Jane that involves transferring soul connections into enemy bodies and territory. The spirit ponders the method of attacking Nakamoto, considering it ideal for himself since he has just arrived in a new world. He notes that this method is widely used against strong opponents and believes that anything can be done there. Keisuke is stating something impossible, his eyes hidden in shadow. Angelica is standing behind him, arms crossed, looking skeptical or displeased. A close-up shows 2 young men talking, focusing on their faces, partially obscured by speech bubbles. A doorway and balcony are shown in the background, indicating an indoor scene near an exit. A girl with tears on her face leans on someone while talking. She mentions the head priest's intention to thank her companion. The gist. Ange delivers a message of gratitude from the head priest. A young man in a military-style coat sits next to a bed, talking about feeling spiritual energy and having other suspicions. He asks if someone's spirit has left their body after using their powers. The holy priestess Angelica stands with her eyes wide open and her mouth slightly open, clutching the collar of her plaid dress to her chest. The background swirls with dark, ominous patterns. She quietly admits her guilt. Angelica, the character, speaks, mentioning a recently made suggestion. Part of her face is visible, showing intent as she explains. The dialogue bubble contains the content. A close-up of Ange's face shows her staring ahead, sweat on her cheek. She asks a question, trying to clarify what Keisuke means. Ange confronts the man, sitting among rocks or clouds, asking if he knew everything from the beginning. The dialogue reveals the tension over hidden knowledge. A tense conversation ensues with accusations of causing pain and attracting an evil spirit, denying involvement and connections with the high priest. The gist. Accusations of pain and an evil spirit arise. Nakamoto looks up, his mouth slightly open and sweat on his face. His eyes widen, as if in shock or realization. A dark aura seems to surround him, accentuating the tension. He senses a malevolent presence emanating from his companion. The 2 young men are in close conversation. Nakamoto is showing concern, and Ange is smiling behind his cover. They discuss a possible ulterior motive behind the plan, involving the old man and the young woman. Priestess Angelica nervously confesses her affection for her father, asking if he can believe her. Nakamoto quietly repeats her words, sitting on the bed facing her. Nakamoto suggests that it would be easier if Ange were a man, noting that men are rare in this place. Keisuke sits on the bed, deciding to call the police after finding the body. He confirms that the landlord also needs to be informed. The situation involves reporting the body and contacting the authorities. The clothes are neatly folded on the floor next to a paper bag that contains the purchased items. Nakamoto remembers being told they could be thrown away. Ange says while adjusting her clothes. She mentions that clothes in this world are much better and more important to her. The point is that she values clothes highly. The playground stands empty at night, lit by distant lights and the windows of a multi-story building. Anze sits alone at the foot of the slide, hugging her knees, looking down. Ange reacts with surprise. expressing self-criticism, calling herself an idiot. The picture shows a long, empty city road lined with tall buildings under a cloudy sky. She expresses regret or realization against the backdrop of a quiet scene. Keisuke remembers that he forgot something very important and becomes annoyed that the system message keeps reminding him of it. Nakamoto walks quickly past a wall covered in torn posters and graffiti, looking thoughtful. He talks about being overwhelmed by the thought of many spirits in a place called Anj. He admits that he has forgotten this fact and is afraid of going crazy. Keisuke wonders if the ghost appeared suddenly, admitting that he lost his temper over a single opinion. Nakamoto questions his feelings for Angelique as the scene moves to a rooftop with dynamic action lines and sound effects suggesting movement or collision, creating a tense atmosphere. Nakamoto speaks with determination, sweat on his face, explaining that he must clear things up and apologize. Ange watches from the car as he forces himself out of the vehicle. The scene captures a moment of tension and urgency. Ange sits with her arms wrapped around herself, looking down. Keisuke stands in front of her, telling her that he has finally found her. The action takes place on the street. Nakamoto, with a tired expression, says that he is sorry and that he was a bad father. Nakamoto suggests that they go home. The scene conveys regret and a desire for reconciliation. The sky at night appears cloudy with two speech bubbles containing reflective dialogue. One expresses unclear thoughts at the moment, the other criticizes Nakamoto's behavior towards Ange. The point: the dialogue reveals self-reflection and judgment about actions directed towards Angelique. Nakamoto admits to doubts about himself and explains that he has never had anyone he liked. He asks why a certain girl came to him thinking she was a liar. Ange tearfully calls herself an idiot, revealing that she thought he came for a reason. The narrator notes that the favor of the holy priestess Angelique has decreased by 200. Nakamoto looks to the left with a look of sadness and sweat on his face. He speaks of confusion and emotional turmoil in his mind. The background is dark, and there is a bright light behind his head. The clenched fist is shown in close-up, emphasizing the tension. Nakamoto is saying that there is no need to be upset about another girl. On the playground, under the night sky, Nakamoto expresses his desire to change and improve life, promising to stop saying bad things and to take care of Ange. They talk about wanting the young priestess to dress well and live a good life, inviting her to come back, promising to have fun together. The young man declares that he will prepare a delicious meal. He adds another comment, hesitant but determined. The text below notes that the priestess's favor has increased by 1. The gist: Nakamoto promises to prepare a delicious meal. Angelica approaches the surprised Nakamoto closely. His eyes widen, a bead of sweat appears on his face. She wears glasses and a plaid scarf, and he wears a jacket with a patch. The moment is tense and unexpected. Nakamoto and Angelique stand nearby. Ange looks up, speaking. Keisuke sweats and listens. The girl explains that her fear made her hide nearby, expecting her father to come for her. Ange tells the young man that she has watched and followed him many times, feeling despair. Nakamoto listens to her silently. The priestess openly expresses her deep feelings. Angelica says something quietly. Nakamoto responds with a confused or surprised expression. Keisuke seems to express sympathy and surprise at her statement or question. Angelica kicks a small object while Nakamoto stands nearby. They discuss what a normal man would do, wondering if the situation is dire. Angelique stands outside in the twilight, looking away. She says she is tired of praying only with women and wants to leave the temple. Silhouette of city buildings against a cloudy sky. Gist: Ange expresses a desire to leave the temple and change her prayer routine. Angelique reflects on her first meeting with her father, describing a mixture of ordinary appearance and heroic imagery, noting that Nakamoto's ordinary gaze contrasts with colder images elsewhere. Nakamoto stands with his head down, surrounded by arrows piercing the background, showing an internal struggle. He talks about the impossibility of living without an ideal man, reflecting a deep thought. The essence: Keisuke struggles with longing for an ideal partner. Angelique poses confidently among 3 smiling people. The dialogue reveals her intention to meet her father briefly and then find a better man. The scene shows a mixture of casual intimacy and personal determination. Nakamoto and Angelique discuss the perception of young girls, with Keisuke expressing skepticism and Ange believing it may be an exaggeration. Angelica speaks by showing part of her face and upper body. She wears a patterned scarf and expresses that she was very nervous, but hesitates before continuing. The point: She shows her nervousness. Angelica stands outside with a checkered scarf around her neck and her long hair flowing behind her. She wears a sleeveless top and looks emotional but determined. Speech bubbles show her saying that she likes her father now and wants to stay with Nakamoto. Angelica lies in bed with a sad look and remembers how her father called her Elsa at night. Angie hugs her father, saying that he was kind when they spent time together. Angelica remembers her father's kindness at night. A close-up of Ange is shown with tears in her eyes, speaking with an emotional expression. She denies lying with other girls and states that she never wanted to be with the listener. The scene conveys her sincere statement. Angelique speaks under a cloudy night sky, with bare trees and illuminated street lamps behind her. She claims that everything has changed. The point: everything has changed. Nakamoto talks to another Ange, explaining his reluctance to be with someone like Elsa, describing Ange as the opposite. He shows a slight smile during the dialogue. A hand gently rests on the girl's head with her eyes closed. She wears a checkered dress and looks calm. Nakamoto confesses his sympathy, calling her name, Ange. A hand holds a smartphone with a blank screen. A speech bubble near the phone says that this is a big problem. Two young people stand outside at night. Angelique looks worried and Nakamoto puzzled. They discuss the absence of the ghost and note that several guesses were made a few days ago. The scene focuses on their search and uncertainty. Angelica is persistent about the possible abuse of her body, including sexual and unsanitary things. She asks if Nakamoto thinks less of her because of it. Nakamoto reassures Angie not to worry and says that everything is fine because Angie is his daughter. The background is filled with soft floral patterns, creating a calm atmosphere. Nakamoto says he needs to find where the ghost is hiding. Angelica asks if he's talking about small pests. Nakamoto says he needs to find a cure for small pests. Two speech bubbles float on a dark, swirling background. The first bubble contains a phrase expressing interest, while the second suggests something to destroy. A contrast is established between curiosity and destruction. Nakamoto raises one hand with a serious expression. He speaks of a ghost that is skilled at hiding, showing surprise or admiration. Two shadowy figures converse within a dark space filled with abstract patterns. Nakamoto notes the certainty of Angie's perception, while the girl notes that every street has been searched, but the ghost has not been found. Angie stands inside the glowing circle, wondering if it is working and if Nakamoto is watching from afar. Keisuke confirms that the ghost remains inside Angie, inside the circle. Angelica reacts with surprise and concern, as Nakamoto, sweating and nervous, says something out loud while covering his mouth with his hand. Keisuke looks worried, and Nakamoto screams that something bad has happened. A large, ghostly figure with fluttering tentacles holds a terrified Unkanji tightly from behind. She resists, eyes wide, as if she had been suddenly caught off guard. The creature asks if the hero feels relieved, and muses on fate and Kami-san's failure. A large skeletal figure with long, sharp fingers opens his mouth wide. Speech bubbles indicate that he is described as a general of evil spirits and is closer to living spirits than undead. The scene focuses on his menacing presence and nature. Angelique, trapped in her bonds, calls out to her father for help, showing her distress. The scene shifts to an empty playground at night, emphasizing her helplessness and frustration. A grotesque figure with empty eyes and a long tongue leans over Nakamoto, whose face is partially covered by his hand. Speech bubbles ask what they will do next, addressing the smaller figure as a hero. Keisuke tells himself to stay calm, saying he is used to this kind of goading. The scene cuts to a close-up of a serious-looking Nakamoto. Nakamoto stands with his back to the viewer. A ghostly figure with a long tongue floats to the right, interfering with the proceedings. Dark speech bubbles express surprise and accusation. The ghost, with wide eyes and open mouth, declares that it is about to perform a dangerous attack called Ange Panchi. The background emphasizes the tension with dark strokes and thick lines. Nakamoto holds a glowing cross-shaped sword. He notices the other's overestimation. The scene highlights a powerful skill called Holy Sword Skill. The gist: Nakamoto criticizes the opponent's excessive actions. Nakamoto levitates in midair, arms spread wide, facing the threat with intense concentration. Sharp spikes appear below as he reacts to the sudden stop. Confusion and surprise mark the scene as he tries to comprehend the interruption. Nakamoto looks determined and slightly nervous, sweat visible on his face. He claims that his skills do not work on the other person. The scene conveys a confrontation in which the abilities do not work. Nakamoto stands outside the gate at night, thinking about the powerful evil spirit he encountered for the first time. He ponders what action to take next. A young girl with long hair sits on an expensive sofa in a richly decorated room. She thinks out loud about the gift she will soon receive. The anticipation of the gift is her concern. A monstrous figure with an open mouth and tongue extended raises both hands, each palm glowing with circular energy spheres. The figure shouts warnings and commands, calling for people to stop, stay away, and be careful. Heavy lines and shading create a sense of power around the hands and face. Nakamoto explains that increasing the number of moves allows it to hit twice, and increasing it further to 11 increases the effect. The ferocious creature screams when it is hit. Nakamoto discusses activating a unique skill that increases stats tenfold when attacking a minor party member. The ghost stands with visible legs, the others appear to be suppressed on the ground. A monstrous figure with sharp teeth and a long tongue appears, expressing horror at the death of an unborn child. Intense lines emphasize the dramatic moment. Essence: horror confronts the death of an unborn child. Nakamoto stands, grimly holding his weapon under a stormy sky. He reveals that he gained his hateful power by killing the woman he loved and his unborn child. Pain and regret shape his words and stance. Nakamoto grips his weapon, showing strong emotions with his eyes wide open and teeth clenched. He questions his desire for a certain power, expressing disgust and nausea. He speaks harshly, reflecting an internal conflict. Keisuke stands in a dimly lit park at night, holding his sword tightly. He comments on how much he likes the park, and notes that it remains undamaged. The atmosphere is tense, but calm. Nakamoto extends his hands forward, saying that he has often used his power to save Ainge, and warns against rushing now. The horned humanoid figure is shown looking up in pain or stress, with lines of movement indicating a quick move or strike. Two speech bubbles warn against killing, and suggest making the ghost break. The gist: the ghost is not being called upon to kill, but to make it confess or break. A young man, looking upset, asks someone named Nakamoto not to clap. He then makes a hand gesture, noting that this is the 11th time. Nakamoto approaches a figure on the ground who says he mentioned something during the series of blows. Keisuke reacts with shock and confusion. Nakamoto explains the sacred sword's special effect against spirits and undead, and angrily rants at the cruel treatment of his daughter. A white figure lies on the ground, a boot pressing on its face. The spirit speaks, apparently accepting the suffering as a necessity. A young man asks a strange creature who gave him orders. The creature screams loudly, sticking out its tongue and opening its eyes wide. Nakamoto demands answers, standing still. Nakamoto sits holding a large sword and speaks firmly. Speech bubbles indicate a serious, determined discussion about not holding back or using secondary techniques in interrogation. The ghost yells at Nakamoto to stop, saying he did nothing wrong. The spirit explains that Ainge has a strong magical defense that is difficult to break. The spirit lies on the ground with its eyes closed, speaking softly. The speech bubble wonders if being a man means selling out in some way. The atmosphere is dark and tense. The young man grabs the struggling figure tightly, holding it down on the textured floor. The captured spirit appears desperate, begging for help. Its speech is broken and pained, suggesting abnormal or extreme suffering. The gist: Nakamoto suppresses the spirit, which screams in pain and begs for help. Nakamoto wonders if the spirit is begging for forgiveness or stalling for time. Another thought questions the necessity, though that may not matter. The scene captures internal conflict and uncertainty. The spirit has a distorted expression and sticks out a long tongue, appearing aggressive or upset. A dark speech bubble conveys the group's fear of Nakamoto's revenge and seeks to understand it. At night, an abandoned playground stands silently beneath the dim city lights. Dialogue in dark speech bubbles reveals that Nakamoto is being called too powerful, with the power to change the world. The scene conveys a sense of impending change or danger associated with the playground setting. Nakamoto reacts calmly to the threat, considering the attempt on his life a failure. The setting is simple, with a textured background. The point is that the attempt to kill Keisuke failed. The night sky is visible, with scattered clouds and a bright full moon. 2 black speech bubbles contain text discussing plans related to angers and a potential breakthrough. The spirit begs for the poison to be neutralized after revealing all the information. Nakamoto demands more information in exchange for mercy, standing over the spirit impaled on the stakes. The night sky above an empty playground is filled with glowing orbs, reminiscent of fireworks or ethereal lights. A speech bubble appears among the lights, indicating a conversation or narrative. Grotesque spirit figures resembling ghostly spermatozoa surround a humanoid with a skull-like face and an elongated tongue. Dark speech bubbles hint at diabolical designs and ironic laughter. A large, muscular humanoid bird figure with a beak and sharp talons appears among dynamic motion lines and smoke effects. Its fierce appearance is emphasized by dark speech bubbles with text around it. A giant skeletal figure looms over the small man. The giant claims that he can now erase Keisuke by absorbing all the spirits. Nakamoto asks if the giant has truly absorbed all the spirits that came to him. A monster with large fangs and a long tongue calls for a try. Nakamoto, holding a sword, expresses gratitude and a willingness to fight together. A large, muscular figure with a furious expression raises a clenched fist, seemingly ready to strike. Nakamoto stands in the foreground, facing the giant. Nakamoto holds his sword, solemnly speaking of a father's invulnerability to his daughter. He conveys a serious message, focusing on family ties and protection. Nakamoto, with a tense expression and mouth wide open, shouts out a count of 11 strokes, while another speech bubble suggests trying again against a dark background. The gist: the young man demands 11 strokes and insists on trying again. Nakamoto looks away uncertainly and remains silent. His uncertain mind lingers on the words he wants to say, but doubts their sufficiency. The young men discuss the difficulty of protecting it versus destroying it. Nakamoto warns that the place could suffer significant damage. Ainge reluctantly agrees. Nakamoto tenses, squeezing the large, muscular creature's hand. He commands the creature to regain consciousness. Keisuke prepares to throw a strange, grotesque humanoid figure with tentacle-like appendages into the surreal setting of the sky. Nakamoto screams angrily, showing strong emotions, and tears stream down his face. The scene closes up to show his rage and determination.